Ladies and gentlemen, you don't need more talent. You don't need more luck. You don't even need more resources. What you need is consistency. Consistency is the bridge between where you are and where you want to be. It's not about doing it once. It's about doing it every single day, whether you feel like it or not. Motivation is a feeling. It comes and it goes. Some days you wake up inspired, ready to take on the world, and you think nothing can stop you. Other days you wake up tired, uninspired, and maybe even frustrated, and the last thing you want to do is move toward your goals. And if you're honest with yourself, you know exactly how dangerous that cycle is. If you live by motivation alone, your life becomes unpredictable. You'll be up one day, down the next, on fire for a week, then stuck in a rut for 3 months. Motivation is not stable enough to carry the weight of your dreams. That's why discipline must become greater than motivation. Discipline is not about how you feel. It's about what you decide. Discipline is what makes you get up early when you'd rather sleep. Discipline is what makes you pick up the phone to call a client when you'd rather avoid rejection. Discipline is what makes you go to the gym when you'd rather sit on the couch. Discipline is about choosing long-term results over short-term comfort. Think about it like this. A farmer doesn't wait until he feels motivated to plant seeds. He doesn't look at the soil and say, you know what, I'll wait until I feel like farming. If he did, he would starve. A farmer knows that the harvest depends on his discipline, not his mood. So every day he shows up in the field. Some days it's hot, some days it's cold, some days the work is hard, but he still plants, waters, and tends the ground. That's why months later, he has a harvest while the man who waited for motivation has nothing. Your goals are no different. Most people sabotage their own progress because they're waiting for inspiration to strike before they act. But inspiration is not a reliable business partner. Discipline is. Discipline is steady. Discipline is predictable. Discipline produces. That's why people who rely only on feelings rarely finish what they start. They enroll in courses but never complete them. They get excited about a new idea, but abandon it as soon as it gets uncomfortable. They set goals every January, but by February, the goals are forgotten. The truth is, they're not failing because they lack intelligence or talent. They're failing because they never built the muscle of discipline. Discipline is like a muscle. The first time you use it, it feels heavy. Waking up early once feels like torture. Saying no to distractions feels impossible. But if you keep showing up, if you keep doing it even when you don't feel like it, that muscle grows. Soon what once felt hard becomes normal, and what was once normal becomes easy. Eventually, discipline becomes your default setting. At that point, your results are no longer tied to motivation at all. They're tied to habits that operate almost automatically. This is why some people seem unstoppable. It's not that they're more talented than you. It's not that they're luckier. It's that they've trained themselves to act regardless of emotion. They don't skip work because they're tired. They don't abandon the plan because they're discouraged. They made a decision once and they stick with it daily. Over time, those small disciplined choices compound into massive success. Discipline is also what protects you from the lies your mind tells you. Because let's be real, your mind will give you 1,000 reasons not to act. I'll do it tomorrow. I'm too busy right now. It's not the right time. I'll start when I feel ready. Those are not reasons. Those are excuses in disguise. If you keep listening to those voices, your dreams will stay stuck in the realm of someday. Discipline silences those voices by replacing feelings with action. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop asking, do I feel like it? And you start saying, this is what I do, period. When you look at the most successful people in any field, they all have this trait in common. Athletes train even when their bodies are sore. Writers write even when the words don't flow. Entrepreneurs work on their businesses even when the profits aren't there yet. Parents raise their kids with love and effort even when they're exhausted. None of that is powered by motivation. It's powered by discipline. And discipline creates trust. Not just trust with other people, but trust with yourself. Every time you keep your word to yourself, you build confidence. You know you can rely on you. That's why people who live by discipline have a certain strength about them. They walk with certainty because they're not controlled by moods. They're guided by decisions. And that inner certainty makes them magnetic to opportunities because opportunities are attracted to people who are steady, not shaky. The question is never whether motivation will run out. It always does. The real question is, will you keep moving when it does? Because if you only move when you feel like moving, you'll never finish the race. But if you make discipline the standard, you will finish. And finishing always beats starting with excitement but quitting halfway. You don't have to move mountains in a day to change your life. The problem is most people think if they can't do something big right now, then what they do doesn't matter. That's a lie. Small actions done consistently are what create massive transformations. Think of a drop of water. A single drop doesn't look powerful. It doesn't feel significant. But let that drop fall on stone day after day, and eventually the stone wears down. It's not the size of the action, it's the repetition that gives it power. This is why people underestimate themselves. They imagine success is built on giant leaps, on once-in-a-lifetime opportunities, on lucky breaks. They wait for that one perfect idea, that one big client, that one big moment. Meanwhile, the person who decides to make 100 small, faithful steps leaves them behind. It's not the giant leap that gets you there, it's the daily step. Small actions are easy to ignore because they don't feel urgent. Eating one unhealthy meal doesn't make you overweight today. Skipping one workout doesn't destroy your health overnight. Ignoring your business for a day doesn't bankrupt you immediately. That's why people shrug off the small things. But success and failure don't show up overnight. They're compounded by what you do or don't do daily. The same principle works in reverse. Just like success compounds, so does neglect. Eat junk food every day for a year and your health shows it. Ignore your business daily and your bank account will prove it. Avoid hard conversations in your relationships and over time distance grows. It's the daily neglect of small things that creates major breakdowns, just like the daily repetition of small actions creates breakthroughs. Look at any skill you admire in someone else. Maybe it's their ability to speak confidently, or their physical strength, or their financial wealth. You're not seeing the one-time action. You're seeing the fruit of hundreds, even thousands of small, consistent actions stacked on top of each other. A speaker who captivates an audience didn't wake up that way. They practiced word by word, speech by speech, often in front of small groups or even just the mirror. A strong body isn't built by one workout. It's built by the daily decision to push a little more weight, run a little further, or resist one more unhealthy temptation. Wealth isn't built by one lucky investment. It's built by disciplined saving, wise decisions, and daily effort that compounds over time. The trap is that small actions are deceptively easy. They're so easy to do, but they're also so easy not to do. Reading 10 pages a day is easy. It's also easy to skip. Making one sales call is easy. It's also easy to avoid. Spending 15 minutes with your child is easy. It's also easy to put off because they're so small. We tell ourselves they don't matter. But if you add up all the skipped actions, you end up with a life that reflects neglect instead of growth. The key is not asking, what can I do once, but what can I do daily without fail? Think of the person who decides to save $5 every single day. $5 doesn't sound like much. Most people would laugh at that amount. But $5 a day adds up to $150 a month. And in 10 years, with consistency and wise investment, it turns into thousands. The person who never saves because they think it's too little will have nothing. The person who saves small amounts consistently will have abundance. The difference is not income, it's consistency in small actions. When you begin to take small actions daily, something else happens. You start to rewire your mind. At first, you may not see the result, but your brain recognizes the habit. It begins to expect you to show up. It starts to shift your identity. That's how daily journaling turns someone into a writer. That's how daily learning turns someone into an expert. That's how daily acts of love turn someone into a caring spouse or parent. Small actions don't just change your results, they change who you are becoming. And here's what most people miss: small actions multiply themselves. That one sales call today gives you the courage to make 2 tomorrow. That one workout builds stamina for a harder workout next week. That one page written today leads to a chapter written in a month. Momentum builds because you are consistent with the little things. It's like pushing a flywheel. At first, it barely moves. You push and push, and it feels like nothing is happening. But keep pushing, keep showing up, and eventually that wheel turns faster and faster until it's spinning on its own power. That momentum never comes to the person who quits because the first pushes felt insignificant. So when you look at your goals, stop underestimating the power of the small. Stop waiting for the perfect day, the perfect mood, or the perfect amount of energy. Do something today, even if it's tiny, even if it seems invisible, because those small actions are never wasted. They're stacking, compounding, multiplying behind the scenes. And one day, what felt like tiny steps will have built a giant staircase that carried you to the life you once thought was out of reach. Every time you make a choice, you cast a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. The problem is, most people don't realize that consistency doesn't just create results, it creates identity. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you're shaping who you believe yourself to be. And the opposite is true too. Every time you break your own word, you reinforce the idea that you can't be trusted even by yourself. The real transformation happens not when you achieve the goal, but when you become the kind of person who does the work daily regardless of feelings. Think about how children learn who they are. They don't just wake up one day with an identity. It's built on repeated actions and experiences. If a child is told every day they're lazy, eventually they believe they're lazy. If a child is encouraged daily and sees themselves taking responsibility, they start to believe they are capable. Adults are no different. You are constantly reinforcing who you are through the choices you make. Do you show up on time? Or are you always late? Do you finish what you start, or do you quit halfway? Every action reinforces your identity in one direction or another. Consistency is the most powerful tool for shifting that identity. If you want to see yourself as disciplined, then act disciplined daily. If you want to see yourself as someone who is healthy, then make healthy choices consistently. It doesn't matter if the actions feel small. Each one is a brick, and over time, those bricks build a house. People underestimate this because the change doesn't happen in a day. You don't wake up one morning with a brand new identity. But after weeks, months, years of consistent action, you look back and realize you are no longer who you used to be. This is why people struggle with change. They try to change outcomes without changing identity. They say, I want to lose weight, but they still see themselves as someone who struggles with health. They say, I want to make money, but deep down they still see themselves as broke. They're trying to paste a new outcome on top of an old identity. It doesn't work. The shift happens when you begin to embody the identity through consistent actions, even before you see the external results. When you go to the gym consistently, you start to believe you are the kind of person who cares for their body. When you save money consistently, you start to believe you are the kind of person who is financially responsible. The action rewires the identity, and the identity sustains the action. Identity built on consistency is powerful because it's self-reinforcing. Once you see yourself as a certain kind of person, you act in alignment with that belief. If you believe you're a disciplined person, you don't need to argue with yourself every morning about whether to work. You just do it because that's who you are. If you believe you're a loving spouse, you don't need to talk yourself into showing care. You act out of your identity. That's why consistency is not just about building habits. It's about building the foundation of who you are. But here's the trap. Inconsistency also builds identity. Every time you quit on yourself, you tell your subconscious, I don't follow through. Every time you delay the action you promised yourself you'd take, you reinforce, I can't trust myself. Over time, that identity makes progress almost impossible because you don't just think you fail, you believe you are a failure. That's why people get stuck in cycles of starting and quitting. They're not just dealing with actions, they're dealing with an identity that was shaped by inconsistency. The way out of that cycle is simple, but not easy. You must start keeping small promises to yourself and do it consistently. Don't try to rebuild your identity with a giant leap. Start small. If you tell yourself you'll wake up at 6 a.m., then wake up at 6 a.m. even if it hurts. If you tell yourself you'll drink more water, then drink it. It sounds almost too simple, but every time you do what you said you would do, you vote for a stronger identity. And as those votes accumulate, they start to outweigh the old identity. Soon, instead of saying, I try to be disciplined, you say, I am disciplined. Instead of saying, I hope I succeed, you say, I succeed because that's who I am. When you consistently act in line with the person you want to become, you create momentum. That momentum builds confidence. And confidence built on identity is unshakable because it's no longer about external results or temporary motivation. It's about who you know yourself to be. People can take your possessions, they can challenge your ideas, they can doubt your abilities, but they cannot take away the identity you've built brick by brick through consistency. Once you own that identity, it becomes the most valuable asset you carry into every area of your life. Most people wait around for the right feeling before they act. They think they need to feel motivated, inspired, or energized before they take the next step. But that's why they never get anywhere, because feelings are fickle. They come and go like the weather. One day you feel like you can conquer the world. The next day you don't even feel like getting out of bed. If your progress depends on feelings, your progress will always be unstable. The truth is that feelings follow faithfulness, not the other way around. You don't feel good and then act good. You act consistently, and eventually the feelings line up with the actions. Think about exercise. No one feels like going to the gym every day. The body craves comfort. The mind wants the easy way. But when you show up consistently, even when you don't feel like it, something happens. After a while, your body begins to crave movement. Your energy increases. You start to feel stronger, healthier, and more alive. The good feeling comes after the action, not before it. That's why so many people never experience that reward. They sit around waiting for the energy to exercise, when in reality, the energy only comes after you've already exercised faithfully. The same principle is true in business. Most entrepreneurs don't wake up every day excited to make calls, send emails, or work through problems. But the ones who succeed are the ones who show up anyway. At first, it feels like drudgery. At first, it feels like pushing a boulder uphill. But if you stay faithful to the process, the momentum builds. Soon the same work that felt exhausting begins to feel exciting. The small wins start stacking up. The clients start coming in. The income begins to grow. Suddenly you're fired up about the work, but not because you waited for inspiration. It's because you stayed faithful long enough for the feelings to catch up to the action. Even in relationships, this is true. People say they don't feel in love anymore, so they stop doing the things they did at the beginning. They stop being thoughtful. They stop communicating. They stop making effort. But the reason they don't feel in love anymore is because they stop being faithful to the actions that created that feeling in the first place. When you act with love consistently, when you invest time, energy, and attention, the feelings of love come rushing back. The spark doesn't create the action creates the spark. What happens when you rely on feelings first is that you become a slave to your moods, and moods are terrible masters. One bad day can destroy your momentum. One discouraging word from someone else can knock you off track. One failure can convince you it's not worth trying. That's why discipline is greater than emotion. Faithfulness is greater than mood. When you decide in advance what you will do and then do it no matter how you feel, you put yourself in control of your life. You stop living by emotion and start living by principle. And principles are steady. It's important to understand that feelings are not the enemy. Feelings are feedback. They let you know how you're experiencing life in the moment. But they are not meant to be the driver of your decisions. When you let feelings sit in the driver's seat, they will always steer you toward comfort and away from growth. Growth requires discomfort, and discomfort never feels good in the moment. But the faithfulness to endure that discomfort produces results that eventually feel incredible. Look at anyone who has mastered a skill. At the beginning, it never feels good. Playing the piano is frustrating when your fingers don't cooperate. Learning a new language is exhausting when your tongue trips over unfamiliar sounds. Building a business feels discouraging when no one is paying attention. But those who stay faithful long enough eventually reach a point where the skill feels natural, even joyful. The good feelings of confidence, mastery, and fulfillment only come after the faithfulness of practice. This is why you can't wait until you feel ready. You'll never feel ready. You'll never feel perfectly confident before you take the leap. You'll never feel fully equipped before you start. Readiness is not a feeling. It's a result of action. You feel confident after you act consistently, not before. You feel competent after you practice faithfully, not before. You feel motivated after you see results, not before. The flow of progress always moves in that direction. So when you don't feel like doing what you need to do, remember this, the feeling will come later. Right now, you act out of faithfulness. Right now, you do what you said you would do. Right now, you show up even if you're tired, discouraged, or uninspired. And as you keep showing up, as you remain faithful, the feelings will eventually follow. And when they do, they will be stronger, more sustainable, and more rewarding than anything you could have waited for at the beginning. Excuses are the language of limitation. They sound logical, they sound convincing, but underneath they are nothing more than permission slips we give ourselves to quit. The truth is, every excuse is just a carefully packaged lie that keeps us from doing the hard thing. People will say, I don't have time, but the truth is they didn't prioritize. They'll say, I don't have the resources, but the truth is they didn't get creative. They'll say, I'll do it tomorrow, but tomorrow turns into next week, next month, and eventually never. Excuses will always dress themselves up as reasons, but they all lead to the same result, stagnation. Effort, on the other hand, doesn't require explanation. Effort speaks for itself. When you put in the work, you don't need to defend yourself. The results become the proof. The challenge that excuses feel comfortable while effort feels costly. Excuses let you off the hook. They tell you it's okay to relax, it's okay to skip, it's okay to delay. Effort requires you to pay the price in advance, to push through discomfort, to sacrifice ease for progress. That's why most people cling to excuses, because they would rather feel comfortable today than face the effort required to grow into the person they say they want to be. What most people don't realize is that excuses don't just stop you in the moment, they weaken you over time. Every time you justify why you didn't act, you reinforce the belief that quitting is acceptable. Your subconscious learns that when things get tough, you back down over time. That becomes your default pattern. You don't even need to make new excuses because your identity has absorbed the old ones. You start to see yourself as someone who doesn't finish. And once you adopt that identity, your life reflects it. Eliminating excuses requires brutal honesty. You have to catch yourself in the moment when the excuse comes to mind and strip it down to the truth. I don't have time really means it's not important enough to me right now. I don't know how really means I don't want to take the time to learn. I'm too tired really means I didn't prioritize my energy. When you expose the lie behind the excuse, you're left with a choice. Do I stay the same or do I put in the effort? Growth always comes down to that choice. Effort doesn't promise immediate results, but it guarantees eventual progress. That's why effort always outweighs excuses in the long run. Imagine two people. One makes excuses every day about why they can't exercise. The other puts in effort, even if it's only a short workout. After a week, there's not much difference. After a month, the difference is visible. After a year, the difference is undeniable. The one who chose excuses still looks the same, feels the same, lives the same. The one who chose effort has transformed. Same opportunities, same hours in the day, but completely different outcomes because one eliminated excuses and the other embraced them. Another truth about excuses is that they often come disguised as circumstances outside of your control. People blame the economy, their boss, their family, their upbringing, their lack of connections. But history is full of people who had every reason to fail and yet chose effort anyway. They didn't deny the reality of their challenges, but they refused to let those challenges become permanent excuses. They worked harder, they thought differently, they stayed committed, and they broke through limitations. Excuses point outward, effort points inward. Excuses say, it's not my fault. Effort says it's my responsibility. That shift in perspective is what separates people who grow from people who stay stuck. You also have to understand that excuses are contagious. Spend time with people who justify everything, and soon you'll find yourself doing the same. But effort is contagious too. When you surround yourself with people who refuse to settle, who refuse to take the easy way out, you start to adopt their standard. That's why environment matters. If you want to eliminate excuses from your life, spend less time with those who defend theirs and more time with those who challenge yours. The standard you allow around you becomes the standard you accept within you. Excuses will always feel easier in the short term, but they cost you in the long term. Effort feels harder in the short term, but it pays you in the long term. Every excuse you make delays your growth, but every effort you give compounds into progress. The question is not whether you have the ability, the intelligence, or the talent. The question is whether you will keep making excuses or start putting in effort. Because the moment you stop justifying why you can't and start doing what you can, your life begins to move in a different direction. Breakthroughs are never instant. They don't show up on day one of trying. They rarely even show up in the first few weeks or months. The reason most people never experience a breakthrough is because they quit too soon. They plant a seed, water it for a little while, and when they don't see immediate results, they stop. What they don't realize is that the seed is doing its work underground long before anything breaks through the surface. Consistency is the force that keeps watering when nothing seems to be happening, and it's that same consistency that eventually produces the breakthrough. The process of growth is invisible before it becomes obvious. Think about bamboo. When you first plant it, nothing seems to happen for years. You water it, you tend to the soil, you keep showing up, and it looks like the effort is wasted. But underneath the ground, roots are forming, strengthening, and preparing to support massive growth. Then, in a very short span of time, bamboo shoots up several feet almost overnight. The breakthrough looks sudden, but it was years of consistency that made it possible. Most people want the bamboo moment without the years of unseen effort, but that's not how life works. In business, this principle is crystal clear. You can work for months with what looks like little return. You make calls, you send emails, you build products, and it seems like no one is noticing. The temptation is to quit and say it's not working. But the ones who keep showing up, who keep refining, who keep learning and pushing eventually reach a tipping point. The calls start turning into clients, the emails start turning into sales, and the products begin to gain traction. From the outside, it looks like an overnight success. But the truth is that it was consistency creating the foundation for the breakthrough all along. In fitness, the same reality applies. You don't transform your body in one workout. One trip to the gym will not erase years of neglect. But consistent effort day after day begins to compound. At first, the mirror doesn't change much. At first, the scale doesn't move. But underneath the surface, your muscles are adapting, your metabolism is shifting, your endurance is growing. Then one day you look back and realize you're stronger, leaner, and healthier than you were before. The breakthrough wasn't magic. It was the result of steady, repeated actions that didn't look like much in the moment, but added up over time. Consistency is what separates dreamers from achievers. Dreamers talk about what they want. Achievers keep showing up until it manifests. The dreamer gets excited for a week, then loses steam. The achiever keeps working even when it's boring, even when it's frustrating, even when no one else understands why they're still pushing. And eventually, the achiever experiences the breakthrough that the dreamer gave up on too early. The danger is that people often quit right before the breakthrough. They were on day 99 of watering the seed, and the breakthrough was scheduled for day 100. But because they couldn't see it yet, they walked away. They don't realize how close they were to the tipping point. That's why consistency is so critical. You cannot measure progress only by what you see. You have to trust the process and keep doing the work even when the evidence hasn't shown up yet. The truth is, breakthroughs are predictable if you stay consistent. They are not accidents. They are not random. They are the inevitable result of faithfulness. The writer who sits down every day to write will eventually finish the book. The entrepreneur who shows up daily to work on the business will eventually find the strategy that works. The athlete who trains consistently will eventually break records. The student who studies daily will eventually master the subject. None of this is a surprise. It is the natural outcome of relentless consistency. When you understand that breakthroughs are created by repetition, you stop getting discouraged by delays. You start to see delays as part of the process. You stop thinking in days and start thinking in years. You stop measuring progress only by visible results and start measuring it by faithfulness. Because the reality is that the soil always responds to the seed. The body always responds to training. The market always responds to value. The mind always responds to learning. The response may not come today or tomorrow, but it always comes. That's why consistency is the most powerful multiplier in life. It doesn't just add, it compounds. The more days you stack, the stronger the momentum becomes. At first, it feels slow, like rolling a boulder uphill. But eventually the boulder crests the hill and begins rolling on its own. That's when the breakthroughs come quickly, one after another, because consistency has built the foundation to handle them. And the people who experience that flood of results are always the ones who refuse to quit when nothing seemed to be happening. So if you want to transform your life, don't chase motivation. Don't wait for inspiration. Force yourself to be consistent. When you force yourself to be consistent, life will start to reward you in ways that talent, luck, and connections never could. Because at the end of the day, greatness isn't built in one big moment. It's built in the small, repeated actions you do when no one is clapping.